Good morning, Wisdom. My name is Dr. Cara. I'm a proud online verified woman. I come from saltwater, freshwater people, from the sand dunes, from the river mouths, from the mountains and the rocky headlands of the mid-north coast of what's now called New South Wales. I'm descended from a long line of Aboriginal healers. I'm the Executive Director, Indigenous Students at UNSW, a Senior Atlantic Fellow, and a historian, and most importantly, I'm here today as someone carrying the stories, strength, responsibilities, all passed down to me from all. I want to begin by acknowledging the Noongar people, who are the traditional custodians of these unceded lands. I pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I thank them for their ongoing custodianship of this beautiful country. It's a privilege to gather here, and it's even more significant because this is the place where our micro-treaty dialogues will begin. Now, before we go further, I want to acknowledge our Indigenous leadership team, in particular Professor Leanne Holt, who's here with me today, our Deputy Vice-Chancellor Indigenous, and she will be available as well at the end of the session to help answer any questions. But what I want to share with you today is about relationship, responsibility, and the work of structural change. It's a story about what it means for a university, and one of the most prominent universities in Australia, to not just include Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, but to walk with mob and to listen. So UNSW, the University of New South Wales, is one of Australia's leading universities. It's made strong commitments to equity, justice, and to the public good. Through its societal impact framework, UNSW is working to ensure that knowledge leads to action, that research, teaching, and engagement improves lives, challenges injustice, and responds to the world's most urgent needs. So it's not just asking what we know as a university, but it's how we're going to use that knowledge to make a better future. We're here in Coffs Harbour to begin our dialogues with the community because the university has a footprint that spans across New South Wales. From metro to remote campuses and regional sites, the Micro Treaty is going to reflect the voices and the priorities of communities across these many locations. UNSW's strategic vision was built around two things, the first of which is our university-wide strategy, Progress for All, which commits us to inclusion, opportunity and systemic change. The second, our societal impact framework, is a structure that makes sure that what we do as a university will deliver real, measurable benefits for people, communities and the planet. Indigenous knowledges are being placed at the centre of both of these as guiding principles for how we will understand progress, build relationships and create change. So the Micro Treaty will be central to how UNSW leads, with Indigenous governance and priorities woven into how we measure our impact. The societal impact framework is being reimagined through Indigenous ways of knowing, being and doing. The Micro Treaty will guide that process, embedding Indigenous priorities into how the university measures success, delivers outcomes and holds itself accountable. So we've just seen how UNSW's strategies for societal impact and inclusive progress put Indigenous knowledges at the centre. But to understand the idea of how a Micro Treaty came to be and why it matters, we need to go back to 2017, when Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples made a call to the nation in the form of the Uluru Statement from the heart. Now, the Uluru Statement asked all Australians to walk together toward a better future. And I'm going to take a moment, especially for our international guests, just for everybody in the room to understand what it was, what it called for, and why it's still important today. So the Uluru Statement from the heart was the outcome of an unprecedented national dialogue. And this process was led for and by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So delegates from across the country gathered to discuss what meaningful recognition and justice would look like. And their answer came to form three pillars: voice, treaty and truth. So it asks for voice, which is nothing about us without us. It asks for treaty, equal power in the agreement-making table. And it asks for truth. Truth about the nation's history, but also about where we are today. It was an open-hearted invitation asking the nation to walk with us and to lay the groundwork for what we're now doing as a university. So in 2023, the Australian public voted on a proposal to enshrine an Indigenous voice to Parliament in the Constitution. That was a direct response to the call of the Uluru Statement. The voice wouldn't have had the power to make laws, but simply to provide advice on issues that directly impact our communities. And most Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people actually voted yes. But the proposal was defeated in late 2023, and the campaign was marked by disinformation, confusion, and a real failure to engage with truth-telling. And for many of us, that result was quite devastating. But it also clarified something. If change isn't going to come from the top, then we need to build it for ourselves. And that's where the micro-treaty comes in, and that's what we'll turn to next. Shortly after the referendum, when many institutions were uncertain about what to do next, UNSW committed to real, lasting structural change, with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities leading the way. The micro-treaty is one of the outcomes of that commitment, one that embeds voice and treaty and truth in the university systems, structures and relationships through governance grounded in trust, respect and accountability. This thinking was also shaped by the work of Professor Kevin Lowe, a Gubbi scholar and educational leader. Kevin began to explore how public schools and Aboriginal communities might form new place-based partnerships, what he called micro-treaties. These weren't about policy from above. They were about asking communities what they wanted and what a new relationship with them would actually look like and how to build that together. There have been reactions to the term micro-treaty, but treaty at the end of the day simply means agreement. And we shouldn't, as Professor Megan Davis says, shy away from using that word. There's real power for us more in using that word and coming to the table to make an agreement and sticking to the fact that we want that to be called a treaty. So when we were looking at refreshing our Indigenous strategy at UNSW, the idea of shared governance, of community-led change, that was very powerful for us. It helped to inspire us as we asked ourselves, what would this look like at a university level? The micro-treaty and what you see on this slide is not just an institutional promise. It's a shift in the university's architecture, and it affirms self-determination in higher education. It will redefine the community-university relationship, and as the Vice-Chancellor says here, it's about more shaping these dynamics and what the relationship will look like. And that's now, but it's also into the future. So what exactly is a micro-treaty? It's a formal, community-led and community-driven agreement that reshapes how the university will work at every level. And it's not just about listening, although that is exactly what the dialogues are about. It's also about structurally embedding Indigenous authority in the university systems, governance, strategy, planning, and operations. It gives mob a seat at the table, not just occasionally, but consistently, and with accountability. And that's because it's embedded in the university's Progress for All strategy. It's not a short-term initiative, and it's designed to last and to guide how the university will partner with community far beyond this moment. So universities for a long time have formed their Indigenous strategies from consultations, and some of them might have been done really, really well. But these Indigenous strategies have been delivered to or pushed out onto community after that consultation. And so this really flips that on its head. And it asks community, what is your vision? Where does your community see itself in the future? How can the university pay that forward? It asks, how can we help your community achieve that? So the micro-treaty means mob have the opportunity to tell the university what the community's vision for their future is. Now, we need to ask ourselves, how do we as mob leverage this opportunity? Here's this powerful university asking mob, what do you want? What does mob want? And how do we leverage that to get us to where we want to be in the future? So next I want to show you how this is starting to take shape and how Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students, staff, alumni and communities are actually leading it. So the micro-treaty is being built step by step through a process that's transparent, collaborative and accountable. It begins with the Indigenous Representative Council, made up of staff, students, alumni and community, and these are leading the way. They will lead our process, ensuring everything stays grounded in self-determination. The IRC is not an advisory group, it's a governance body that will walk with us to shape, approve and hold the micro-treaty process to account. We are hosting community-led dialogues on country, and we're starting here in Coffs Harbour to listen deeply, to yarn and to discover community priorities and opportunities. And from here, we can determine what those shared priorities are. From there, we'll draft commitments, which is our word for treaty articles. I think treaty articles is what is generally used, but we like the term commitments because that's what we're doing. And so those commitments will be drafted, and they'll get approval from both the Indigenous Representative Council and from the university leaders. And that agreement will be marked through a signing ceremony. And this treaty will be backed by operational plans, real timelines, responsibilities and reporting to ensure that there is delivery of those outcomes and that there's accountability. And this isn't the first time that the university, that UNSW has worked in deep partnership with Aboriginal communities. We have been walking alongside a remote Aboriginal community in New South Wales for several years now. And that relationship is guided by cultural authority and shared leadership. Community-led initiatives have addressed health, housing, justice, education, water and food. And the principles that guide it, respect, local control and a whole of community approach, are the same principles that we're bringing to the micro-treaty. In that partnership, UNSW does not take the lead, the community does. We contribute where we're invited through resourcing, capacity building and shared problem solving. We undergo a staff cultural induction. We share data responsibility and we report back with transparency. There's a lot more to it, but I will say that this is a true partnership and that the micro-treaty will help us support similar work across the state, but only where the communities invite us in. So each place, each relationship will look different, and as it should. This part of the treaty process is about building something lasting, a genuine relationship between the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and the university. It's about making space for communities to define their own vision for their future, to share priorities and challenges, and to identify opportunities where the university can walk alongside and have meaningful impact. It's about ensuring Indigenous knowledges, leadership and voices are embedded in how things are done at the university every single day. At the heart of this is opportunity. The aim is for future generations to grow up strong in who they are, supported by institutions that will respect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples and work in true partnership with communities. It's about creating a legacy, one that honours our elders, uplifts young ones and ensures that all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples are shaping the future in enduring and powerful ways, and that the university is working with them in the way that they want the university to. At its core, the micro-treaty dialogues ask, what are your community priorities, what are your challenges, and how do you want to be in relationship with the university? The micro-treaty will include real commitments in areas that communities say matter most to them, and that may cover economic and social prosperity, health and wellbeing, areas like environmental sustainability. Each commitment will be clear, measurable and Indigenous-led, and in essence, it's about embedding community priorities into our core business as a university. And it all begins here in Coffs Harbour. So the first dialogue on Wellbeing country is where the treaty moves from a concept to action. It's rooted in the strength and leadership and the vision of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities. So this micro-treaty is going to reflect like a local movements with global significance. It'll offer an example of how institutions can respond to Indigenous calls for justice and honour sovereignty, embed Indigenous governance and shift power. So while grounded in an Australian context, its lessons speak to the Indigenous struggles for self-determination and systemic change on a global scale. But we're inviting all local mob to come along. Again, we're here to listen to community priorities, identify challenges and opportunities, and after we do that, we will share back to you what we have heard to make sure that we're getting it right. We are incredibly grateful to the local community for hosting us. The micro-treaty is already being looked at as a model for what Indigenous government might look like in the future in higher education. We've had other universities that have told us they're very keen to follow this path, and we're excited. I'm now going to open the floor for questions. Professor Leanne Holt and I are both here and very happy to yarn further, either here in this forum or in private, but you're also welcome to connect later with us. I've thrown our email up on the screen. Does anybody have any questions?
think it's a great concept. And I just looked at your website about whether you had a rap or not. And, you know, there's been a lot of organisations that have approached me and said, we want to do something different than just the rap, especially after the referendum. So, do you see this as part of a process of stepping away from that government-controlled process?
Yeah, definitely.
And reconciliation?
Yeah, thanks, Uncle. Yeah, definitely. I think that the RAPs have been really good for corporate organisations and having corporate organisations engage with our communities. But when I was at my previous university, we used to do a lot because we were in one of the biggest industry hubs in New South Wales, like right in the centre of it. When we were working with corporate organisations, they all had a RAP and they all wanted to know what to do, how to sort of get to the different stages of their RAP. But their consultation, their connection with community sort of came after they developed the RAP. So they develop the RAP and then they go out and try to find community to actually meet the needs of their RAP. And I sort of feel that that is the wrong way around. Like, you know, community should be a part of that journey right from the beginning. And I believe that the micro treaty actually does just that. And like I mean, so I suppose that was another point. When I came to UNSW, the first thing they said was, we need a new Indigenous strategy. Our Indigenous strategy runs out in 2025, so we want you to prioritise that. And we sort of thought, like, you know, universities, pretty much every university has an Indigenous strategy. They all look very similar. They all look to increase Indigenous students, increase Indigenous workforce, increase community-driven research, increase embedding Indigenous curriculum in learning and teaching, and then some other things on the fringes. That's pretty much what everyone's Indigenous strategy will look like, no matter what university you look. But it's very much developed by the university and then pushed out to the community, as Cara said. And also, I think we need to start thinking about what's our end game? Why are we increasing Indigenous students? Why are we increasing Indigenous workforce? I mean, obviously, when you think about it, that's obvious, but not to universities. Their focus shouldn't be on those things. Their focus should be on what the priorities of the communities are. What are those opportunities that community want to see now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 100 years from now? And universities are, like, you know, they're really strong organisations that have lots of funding, especially our GO8s like University of Melbourne and UNSW and UCID. And there's a lot of opportunity to leverage from that position to actually do some great things for our communities.
Good morning, Dr. Cross. First opportunity to raise a question. Congratulations on the presentation. The issue I want to go to, obviously, is the elephant in the room and out of the room. The issue of the native title versus traditional owner groups and land rights. Not suggesting that you have the answers to that, but do you see a pathway forward in building those, constructs and those relationships?
Yeah, I think that's why we're going to community to ask what they would like us to do as a university, because we've got so much power and it's unexpected, and I don't think a lot of the time, even community would probably think that the only thing they could ask for would be education-based priorities. But they don't see that we can do so much more. And the community that I was referencing before, you know, like we've helped them with water that had 10 times the amount of salt that was healthy. And an Aboriginal, predominantly Aboriginal community, with 68% of the community being Aboriginal, with a lot of chronic health problems, like water is a significant issue. But we utilised our research to make sure that they can then lobby government and change policy with research. So when you're looking at actually going to government and asking for big changes, there's lots universities can do, and there's a lot of weight and power in the things that universities can help community with. So I think there is definitely an avenue for community to ask. And it's been an interesting walk too for us, being more in the university and wanting this process to be Indigenous-led, trying to take your foot off the accelerator a little bit and kind of like, you know, with that balance of driving it forward and making sure that we don't actually fall back into old habits of driving the bus.
I think it was about, like, just going back to your question and also tying in with the example Cara used. Like, in that case, it was about bringing together scientists and engineers and social scientists and, like, you know, the expertise across the university. And in the same way, like, you know, you could bring together our legal expertise and our social scientists and our environmental people to sort of come together and work with the community on, okay, well, what is the solution? Like, you know, how do we move these tensions forward and work out a better way? If something's not working, then, like, you know, it's about utilising the expertise in the university to work best for our communities, not just do what they think our communities want.
Thank you for that presentation. I'm from a mentoring and do like a big crossing session of stuff that we'll talk a little bit about today. But we have been working on like organisational change and some tools to help support that. Like there's this very real interface of the knowledges connecting when building relationships. So I was wondering if you have tools that you're working with, because we do, and it's open for sharing. There's like simplification phases, as well as the design around those tools as well. So we're going to go into places, designed to rebuild relationships, and a lot of that is a focus with, that in-between space, which is tricky to catch and measure, and sometimes you don't need to, but yeah, there's impact to share, and just wondering if you have some tools that to help facilitate that growth.
Yeah, thanks, and we'll be happy to have a yarn with you. So we're basically being guided by the methodology that was used for the Uluru Dialogues, and so Megan, even though Megan's at Harvard at the moment, that Megan's very much working closely with us to guide, like, you know, like what worked before, what didn't work. Obviously, this is a smaller scale, but like, you know, using the tools and resources. And Jeff Scott, who is our chair of our Indigenous Representative Council, was also very much part of that. So is guiding that methodologies, but really happy to have a conversation with you.
And from little things, big things, grow.
That's right. That's exactly right. That's one question. That's a question up there.
I'm just wondering if you can see this as a portal, specifically, a way that maybe Indigenous research, you know, a new HDR type Indigenous research that isn't subject to the sorts of things that Warren said about yesterday, can you see that as potential coming through? Because there's not many universities that have a PhD or a master's that's really in the Indigenous methods and doesn't have to comply to the Western system.
Yes, like we have I think that UNSW, it has, like, you know, just shown such commitment, particularly, like, you know, based on the principles of the Uluru Statement. There's never anything that I've gone to them with where they've said no. So they're very open to just listening and understanding what the community really wants, and then working out ways that we can achieve that. That has been I've been in nearly 2 years now. That has been my experience, and so we're really excited. Like, and if I didn't think that the university had that commitment and that it was going to be shallow promises, I wouldn't be putting myself out here to take this journey, because, like, you know, that's not good for any of the Indigenous staff that we have working at the university to be placed in that position. So I really feel that the university is committed to, like, doing things differently.